Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are tearing open the ultimate American dream factory, reality television.
hmm
We're going past all the manufactured drama, the champagne toasts, the private jets, and we're diving straight into the balance sheet.
Right into the numbers.
Exactly, because this industry, it projects pure opulence and, effortless wealth. But
hmm
when you really look behind the curtain, you find this economic structure that's built on, well, staggering profit margins and, frankly, exploitation.
And that exploitation runs from the unpaid crew all the way up to the star who's, barely scraping by in some cases.
It's that dichotomy, isn't it? The massive wealth the networks are generating versus the often meager compensation for the talent.
That's the core of our mission today.
Mm.
We are going to dissect the economic DNA of unscripted television.
So what does that mean exactly?
It means we're analyzing the whole compensation pyramid from the amateur contestant getting, what, a few $1,000s as a stipend,
Yeah.
all the way up to the A-list stars who are commanding millions. But I think more importantly, we are zeroing in on the fine print.
The contracts.
The contract traps, the clauses that allow networks and production companies to amass billions while at the same time limiting the financial freedom of the very people who make them that money.
And when we talk about contracts making or, breaking a financial future, we have to start with this single negotiation, this one moment of clarity that is really the epicenter of this entire deep dive.
You have to. We're talking about Bethenny Frankel.
And her first contract for the Real Housewives of New York City, she was, in her own words, a nobody at the time.
A complete unknown.
Yet she negotiated a contract that has become, well, it's become a legend in the industry.
It really has. She was reportedly paid only $7,250 for her entire first season.
$7,000 for a whole season of a hit show.
A nominal fee. But she did something revolutionary. She successfully negotiated to strike a single clause from that contract.
And this clause would have given the network, Bravo, a significant percentage of any outside business she created or promoted while she was on the show.
Exactly. She had this fledgling company at the time called Skinny Girl Cocktails.
Just getting started.
And she looked at that contract and essentially said, you can have my time on camera, you can have my drama, but you don't get a piece of my intellectual property. You don't get a piece of my business.
That's exactly right. And that one single line, just crossed out in a basic first season contract, led directly to the eventual, and jaw-dropping, sale of that Skinny Girl brand.
For an estimated $120 million back in 2011.
Wow. And the network got how much of that?
Exactly, 0 cents, not a dime. That single act of negotiation, just keeping that $120 million for herself, that's the anchor of our investigation today into who truly profits from reality TV fame.
Okay, so let's unpack this enormous disparity. We see this explosion of reality TV across every streaming platform, every cable channel. Bravo, TLC, Netflix, Hulu. It's dominating the media landscape.
It is.
But why? What's the simple, foundational economic answer?
The answer is that these formats are just drastically cheaper to produce than anything scripted. That cost differential is the single most important factor driving this whole boom.
So when you look at the fundamental economics of TV production, scripted content is just, what, prohibitively expensive.
Completely. A single episode of a prestige cable drama can cost you anywhere between, say, $1 million and $2.5 million.
Easily.
And that's because you've got costs like unionized writers, high-profile actors, complex special effects, long development cycles.
Yeah.
It all adds up.
So in contrast, what are we looking at for the investment for, say, an hour of unscripted TV?
An hour of reality television typically requires an investment of only about $350,000 to maybe $500,000.
So that's a huge difference.
That low-end cost differential, it's often a 2/3 reduction in your upfront expense. And that changes the entire risk profile for a network.
So they can greenlight multiple reality shows for the price of just one mid-tier scripted drama.
That's the math. And that massive saving on the front end translates directly into what analysts call eye-popping profit margins.
Right, the numbers that Wall Street loves to see.
It really is. The average profit margin across the entire cable industry is already high, maybe around 40%.
Which is incredible on its own.
It is. But the networks that lean heavily on nonfiction content, they dramatically exceed that average. Think about the networks that are basically reality machines.
Like TLC, for instance.
Precisely. Back in 2012, financial reporting showed that TLC was leading all cable networks in profitability. They were posting an incredible 60% profit margin. And the Discovery Network, which also relies heavily on documentaries and unscripted docuseries, was right behind them at 58%. This model isn't just profitable, it is exceptionally, even, brutally efficient at generating shareholder value.
I think it really helps listeners grasp the scale when we compare specific shows. Let's take two shows that were massive hits around that same time.
Absolutely. So take a hit scripted show like Royal Pains on the USA Network.
Okay.
That show consistently required a budget in the range of $2 million to $2.5 million per episode.
Wow. Okay. And what do we compare that to on the reality side?
You compare that to a top-tier nonfiction show on the History Channel, which was often beating those scripted dramas in viewership, by the way.
So we're talking about shows like Pawn Stars or those kinds of docu-reality formats?
Yes. A top nonfiction show on History Channel had an episode budget of only $225,000 to $425,000.
So let me get this straight. The scripted show was sometimes, what, 7 times more expensive per episode?
7 times. The fundamental savings are astronomical.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, this isn't just about avoiding paying, Robert Downey Jr. $50 million for a movie. This efficiency, it comes down to a fundamental restructuring of the creative process where the labor, the human capital, is just deliberately undervalued.
That is precisely the structural issue. The core savings are not primarily in, explosions or expensive location shoots. The savings are driven by labor costs.
Okay.
In scripted television, the creative and technical talent, so the writers, the showrunners, the specialized crew, they're typically covered by robust union contracts.
And that means things like mandated minimum payments, health insurance, pensions.
Crucial pension plans.
Yeah.
And residuals. That's the mechanism that ensures continued payment for the reuse of the content.
Right. Residuals are critical. A unionized writer or actor in a scripted show gets a payment every single time that episode re-airs or is streamed,
ensuring they profit when the network profits repeatedly from their labor. In the reality space, those protections historically just vanish.
So nonfiction writer-producers, the on-screen talent, they're often classified differently.
As independent contractors or excluded employees.
Yeah.
And that results in significantly lower non-union labor costs. This lack of mandated benefits and, most importantly, the absence of residual payments is what directly fuels those 60% profit margins for the networks at the top.
It sounds like the whole industry has been perfectly designed to maximize short-term production costs while retaining, indefinite profit rights over the finished product.
That's the model. And that setup directly determines the pay structure for the talent we're about to discuss.
All right, so let's transition from the production side, where networks are saving millions, to the talent side.
Where the money is distributed in this dizzying and deeply unfair way. The public associates reality TV with those massive top-end salaries, the Kardashians, the housewives.
Right.
But the vast majority of participants fall into the lower tiers where the financial cost of participation, both in their time and career interruption, it might actually exceed the payment they receive.
So we have to break this down into, 3 distinct tiers of reality pay.
I think that's the best way to look at it. You've got game show winnings, you've got competition stipends, and then at the very top you have the docuseries salaries.
Okay, so let's start with the competition genre. Something like Survivor.
Survivor is interesting because it's structured kind of like a meritocracy with a finite pot of prize money. Every contestant is paid something, which is tied to their duration and their placement.
So even the first person voted off gets a check.
Right. The earliest person eliminated still makes around $2,500, and the payment goes up incrementally as they survive each week.
And that incremental payment, I assume, is designed to offset the lost wages from their regular jobs back home.
That's the idea. But the gap between the top players and everyone else is just monumental.
The winner, of course, gets the $1 million prize.
Before taxes, which is a key detail we will definitely get into later. But the runner-up receives $100,000, and the third-place finisher gets $85,000. So while it's significant, the gap really emphasizes how competitive that financial incentive is.
But the stipends, they get dramatically leaner, right? And the potential for exploitation gets a lot higher when you move into the dating show genre, which relies entirely on non-professional talent.
Absolutely. Take a global smash hit like Love is Blind. Contestants reportedly receive $1,000 per week for their participation.
$1,000 a week, so the total potential payout might be, $8,000 total?
Maybe $8,000, depending on the length of filming, which is usually around 8 weeks.
But this $1,000 a week figure is where the legal and ethical exploitation concerns really start to crystallize, especially in a place like California where so much of this filming happens.
Precisely. There was a lawsuit that came from season 2 that detailed some really serious allegations about this rate. The suit alleged that due to the structure of the show.
Where they're basically on call 24/7.
Exactly. They're continuously filmed, they're sequestered in hotels, and they're effectively working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that $1,000 weekly rate, the lawsuit claims, amounts to less than half the California minimum wage.
Because they're required to be available at all hours, but the network classifies that time as participation rather than work.
Which is how they try to bypass labor laws.
Yes.
And this model is replicated across so many dating shows. On Love Island, for instance, the Islanders are reportedly paid a minimum wage stipend, sometimes estimated at about $500 a week.
And that's just to cover rent and bills back home.
Basically, yeah. It covers their expenses while they're sequestered without access to their regular income.
The only time that really changes is when the network has to incentivize, established figures to come back.
The Love Island All-Stars format is a perfect example of that. Those participants who already have some degree of fame, they reportedly earn significantly more. We're talking approximately £2,000 sterling per week.
And that just starkly illustrates the difference in negotiating power, doesn't it? New talent is treated as disposable, but established talent can demand real compensation.
And then you have the extreme cases, like Too Hot to Handle, where contestants reportedly receive no fees whatsoever.
Wait, nothing.
They're paid entirely in luxury perks. It's pitched as a sort of reality TV vacation, with the real financial goal being the prize money, or, crucially, the career bump they hope to get after the show. It's an investment of their time purely for exposure.
Okay, so now let's jump from that to the absolute top tier, the docuseries salaries.
Right. This is where fame has already been cemented, and the money is generated up front for their continued performance.
And the Housewives franchise is the benchmark here. You have to talk about Nene Leakes.
The undisputed queen of the Real Housewives of Atlanta. She commands a salary of $2.85 million per season.
That makes her the highest paid star in the franchise's history, and it just reflects her leverage and her foundational importance to that show's success.
And if we look at the ultimate reality dynasty, the Kardashian-Jenners, the numbers are just astronomical.
I mean, for keeping up with the Kardashians.
Kim, Kourtney, Khloe, and Kylie each reportedly earned a staggering $4.5 million per season.
$4.5 million each.
Kendall Jenner's earnings were a little less, between $3 and $4 million, because she was balancing her runway career, but the family essentially used that show as a vehicle to secure generational wealth.
And Khloe and Kim also took on executive producer roles, right? Which elevated their payout and their control even more.
Significantly.
What stands out to me, though, is the massive disparity even among the leads of a single successful franchise. It all comes down to negotiation skill. You mentioned Emily Maynard on The Bachelorette.
She successfully negotiated her salary up to $250,000. That's considered the high watermark for that role.
But then you have someone like Caitlin Bristow, another Bachelorette, who alleged she was initially offered just $40,000.
$40,000. It just illustrates that even the leads, who carry an entire season on their backs, are routinely lowballed. She only secured a better deal by hiring a lawyer and demanding pay parity with the male leads of The Bachelor.
So the gap between the stipend earners getting $1,000 a week and the stars making millions isn't really a spectrum?
It's a chasm. And the difference is always, always contract power.
That theme of negotiation power brings us right back to the dense legal framework that governs reality TV participation.
The participant agreement.
Right. When you sign up, you're signing this multi-page document. It covers compensation, sure, but it also details who owns the footage, the rights for spin-offs.
It releases the network from nearly all liability, enforces strict confidentiality, and critically, it lays out the terms of your future exclusivity. These documents are legal fortresses.
They're designed to protect the network's financial investment and minimize their risk.
But their secondary function is to severely limit the participants' ability to leverage their fame for any future independent earning potential. So let's take that deep dive back into the story that birthed the most notorious contract provision in unscripted history, the so-called Bethenny Clause. This is where the sheer, unadulterated power of one smart legal move just created a legend. The context is key. Bethenny Frankel was not a star.
No.
She was a struggling entrepreneur who happened to get cast on the first season of RHONY. She was paid that meager $7,250.
And when she reviewed the contract, she saw the clause that basically said, what? Anything you create or promote on this show, the network gets a piece of.
Anything, any business.
Huh?
And she recognized the gravity of that. The show itself was the platform. But signing that clause meant she was giving up equity in her own ideas, potentially forever, just for a few episodes of airtime.
She realized that the platform's value wasn't the $7,000 check.
It was the audience reach. And by successfully eliminating that specific intellectual property clause, she argued that the network shouldn't own any part of her outside efforts. The negotiation was a conceptual fight over ownership.
And the result, of course, was the sale of Skinny Girl cocktails for between $100 million and $120 million.
Which she kept entirely, free and clear of any network obligation. But that negotiation, it taught the networks a brutal, expensive lesson.
It did. So what happened next?
The Bethenny Clause, and we should stress this isn't an official legal term, it's industry jargon, is now a standard provision in virtually all major reality TV contracts. It creates what we call the silent partnership.
Okay, define that for us. What does that silent partnership look like on paper now?
It means the network or the production company grants itself a specific percentage of profits or equity or sometimes even gross revenue from any business or product venture that's popularized, promoted, or even just launched during the star's tenure on the show.
So the network is basically saying, since we provided the free marketing, the millions of viewers, we are entitled to extract equity.
Exactly. Many reality stars today, particularly in the Housewives franchise, have signed contracts that force them to give the network a percentage of their subsequent businesses. They are literally paying for the right to use their own fame.
That's the equity trap. But there's also the career movement trap, right? The exclusivity lockout. These clauses are designed not only to take a piece of your profit, but to actively prevent you from leveraging your fame anywhere else immediately after your season airs.
The exclusivity clauses are brutal. They grant the producer or the network the sole and exclusive right to shop the talent for future seasons, sequels, spin-offs, potentially locking that person into an arrangement that lasts for 5 to 7 years.
And even if they're not ultimately picked up for another season, the window of restriction is just immense.
It is.
Let's break down that timeline, because this is where the contract truly harms a rising star's ability to capitalize on their peak fame.
Okay, so the moment of peak fame is right when the season airs. But the process works backwards from there. First, you have the time from the end of principal photography until the show is edited and actually airs.
And that can be, what, 6 to 12 months?
6 to 12 months, easily.
Huh.
Second, you have the season's airing run, which is another 6 to 12 weeks. Then, and this is the most damaging part, you have the 12-month option window.
And during that year, the producer can just decide if they want to hire you back or cast you in a spinoff.
Right, and you can't do anything else.
So if you put all of that together, you're looking at a potential period of 20 months to over 2 years where that star's career movement is just severely restricted.
They can't appear on rival platforms. They can't start competing media projects.
Duh.
They're essentially frozen, unable to earn significant income outside of their contract, all while their fame is peaking and then likely fading.
This is why the recent action by the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, is so seismic.
It really is. The FTC issued a final rule that bans post-employment non-compete clauses. And it defined the term worker broadly enough to cover independent contractors and, critically, on-air talent.
So that sounds like a direct hit on this exclusivity clause the networks use. The FTC is saying, essentially, that after the job is done, you can't prevent someone from earning a living somewhere else.
That is the exact intention. The FTC refused to provide an exclusion for on-air talent, making it crystal clear that they absolutely intended for this rule to apply to people working in non-scripted programming.
It forces the networks to completely rethink their entire talent control mechanism.
It does that.
But I mean, networks don't just give up billions in control that easily. They're surely going to try to argue that these long exclusivity windows are necessary to protect their massive investment in making a star.
Oh, they're all already planning workarounds.
What are those going to look like?
The most discussed tactic is the concept of garden leave. Traditionally, payment for a reality show is delivered during the production period. The new model will likely stretch that payment out across the entire option window, that full 12 to 24 months, maybe paying the star a small monthly sum with the final payment due on the last day the option would expire.
So they just stretch the same amount of money over a longer period of time, essentially paying the star to just stay home and do nothing.
Precisely. By stretching the payments, the networks can argue that the talent is still technically employed for the entire duration of the option period. They can label the restriction as in-term, meaning during employment, rather than post-term, which is what's banned by the FTC.
So it's a way to maintain legal control over the talent's ability to earn elsewhere. It doesn't give the star more money, it just maintains the network's leverage.
It's a contractual cat-and-mouse game, where the star's ability to earn is still curtailed during their most marketable period.
So for those who successfully navigate that contractual gauntlet, the true value of the show isn't the initial salary or stipend, it's the fame conversion rate.
It's the ability to translate that televised exposure into cold, hard social media income. This is the second career, the influencer pipeline. And it can be astonishingly lucrative.
Reality TV provides this unparalleled accelerated launchpad for that.
It really does. Sources indicate that reality stars can see audience growth of over 50,000% in a single season.
50,000%.
You go from relative anonymity to a massive social media following in a matter of months. It's instantaneous celebrity capital that you can use to build a whole new business model.
The monetization potential is staggering. I mean, take Leah Khatib, a runner-up from the UK's Love Island.
Yeah.
She reportedly entered the villa with fewer than 20,000 Instagram followers. Post-show, her total social audience grew to nearly 7 million across various platforms.
Wow. And that audience size translates directly into massive measurable income. Industry estimates show that her social content alone generates between 1.6 and 2.4 million US dollars annually.
Just from sponsored posts and brand deals?
The show was the high-stakes audition. The influencer career is the jackpot.
But it's not just the sheer size of the audience, right? It's the quality of the connection with that audience that makes reality stars such unique marketing conduits.
That's right. They occupy what we call the hybrid influencer niche.
Okay, what is that?
That hybrid niche merges three powerful archetypes.
Oh.
First, they have the celebrity reach and mass exposure from TV. Second, they build influencer-level trust through constant, direct engagement with their followers.
And
Third, they retain the perceived authenticity of a real person. They have intentionally shown their vulnerable moments on camera, the tears, the breakups, the moments of joy, and that vulnerability creates this immediate, deep rapport with the viewer.
And brands realize this dynamic just worked wonders. They noticed that certain reality franchises, like the stars coming off The Bachelor, were showing engagement levels up to 8 times higher than macro influencers who had similar follower counts.
That's right. The audience feels like they have an established, often emotional relationship with the reality star, which makes them exponentially more likely to trust and purchase whatever product is being advertised.
It bypasses that skepticism you often get with traditional celebrity endorsements.
Completely.
And we can actually quantify this earning potential by looking at the tiers, right? What kind of money are we talking about for a single sponsored post?
For mega or celebrity influencers, so those with over 1 million followers, they can command $45,000 or more per single sponsored post on visually driven platforms like Instagram and TikTok.
$45,000 for one post.
Or more. And if they move to YouTube, which is really the gold standard for trust-based long-form content, those rates can exceed $50,000 per video.
And why is YouTube so much higher?
Because the content is more deeply integrated, it requires a higher level of production, and the audience trust is just deeper.
Even further down the ladder, a so-called micro-influencer, someone with, say, 15 to 75,000 followers, can still pull in a decent amount.
They can. They can earn between $2,000 and $8,000 per post across most platforms. This income, even on a micro scale, is often vastly more stable and significant than the initial stipend they received on the show.
So it makes getting cast, even for just a few episodes, a calculated risk for a total career change.
It does. However, we are seeing signs that this once limitless pipeline is beginning to saturate, particularly for some of the older franchises.
Okay.
While newer, more digitally native shows like Love is Blind still generate huge follower numbers, with popular contestants getting 400 to 900,000 followers instantly, long-standing franchises are facing some structural challenges.
And The Bachelor franchise is a fascinating case study in this, right? A misaligned audience.
It really is. The raw ratings for The Bachelor might look great on paper, but the value of the platform isn't raw viewership anymore. It's the monetization potential of that viewer base.
And the core demographic for The Bachelor is older.
Overwhelmingly white females. age 45 to 65 plus. This demographic is significantly less likely to follow influencers, to engage with branded content on Instagram, or to participate in the creator economy compared to a younger audience.
So the show draws millions of viewers, but those viewers aren't the ones that brands are paying six-figure sums to reach on social media.
Exactly. The audience isn't digitally native on platforms like TikTok. And that makes the show a less profitable launchpad than, say, a Netflix dating show that is designed specifically to capture a younger, more marketable social media audience. The fame conversion rate just drops.
Which makes the show less attractive for contestants whose primary goal is that post-show revenue stream.
It's a real problem for the franchise.
Okay, but the financial story isn't all multi-million-dollar deals and sponsored posts. The money comes in, but the money also goes out, and it often hides this dark underbelly. The psychological pressure to look rich, the resulting debt, and a series of complex tax traps that have led many high-profile stars straight to bankruptcy court.
Or even prison.
Or even prison.
The psychological phenomenon at play here is what we call overcompensation. Reality TV demands a constant need for external validation, and it links a person's self-worth directly to the illusion of affluence they have to maintain for the camera. This is the wealth facade.
And that facade is expensive. It's often built on rented assets and credit. We know participants frequently rely on renting luxury houses, high-end cars, accessories, just to keep up appearances while filming, all while constantly dodging the reality of their unstable finances. This leads to probably the most insidious financial danger they face: the gifting tax trap, the hidden liability of freebies.
Exactly. The IRS is extremely clear on this. Every gifted product, every sponsored trip, every PR package an influencer or reality star receives in exchange for promotion is considered taxable income by the IRS at its fair market value. So if viewed as a barter transaction, I give you this $10,000 bag, you give me $10,000 worth of publicity.
Precisely. This issue famously blew up back in 2006 with the Academy Awards. Oscar nominees received these lavish swag bags worth over $100,000.
But then they were hit with massive, unexpected tax bills for items they never even purchased. They hadn't realized they needed cash reserves to pay the tax on the fair market value of those luxury goods.
And this applies directly to the creator economy today. If a brand provides a star with $600 or more in value, including free products, they're legally obligated to issue a Form 1099 NSC.
That 1099 NAC is crucial. It's an independent contractor income form, and it means the government already knows exactly what that star received. They're expecting that exact dollar amount to be reported as income.
And a lot of creators miss this detail, fail to set aside funds, and then suddenly face thousands of dollars in unexpected tax liabilities that they don't have the liquidity to pay.
And adding to that complexity is the fact that these stars are independent contractors. They're not salaried employees receiving a W-2.
Which comes with massive self-employment tax obligations that salaried workers never have to deal with.
They're liable for the full 15.3% self-employment tax rate. That covers both the employer and the employee portions of Social Security and Medicare.
And unlike standard employees who have taxes automatically withheld from every paycheck, independent contractors have to file and pay estimated quarterly taxes.
On April 15th, June 15th, September 15th, and January 15th, if they expect to owe $1,000 or more annually.
So not only do they have to manage their own health insurance and retirement, but they have to manage quarterly estimated tax payments on all these complex income sources, stipends, sponsored content, gifted products, or face severe penalties and interest from the IRS.
This combination of psychological pressure to look rich, the reckless spending fueled by that pressure, and the complexity of independent contractor taxes. It often results in a predictable cycle of financial ruin that plays out on the public stage.
And we can't discuss this section without detailing the highest profile examples of this financial vortex. Let's look at the Giudices from the Real Housewives of New Jersey. This wasn't just debt, this was criminal fraud.
Teresa Giudice and her husband were charged with an incredible 39 counts of fraud. Conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud, and ultimately bankruptcy fraud and failure to file tax returns for multiple years.
So they were actively concealing income and assets from their creditors and from the IRS.
Which resulted in prison sentences for both of them and massive restitution orders. It's a textbook example of how a failure to manage the facade and the tax burden leads to outright illegal behavior.
And similarly, we saw Abby Lee Miller of Dance Moms face the consequences of concealing income. She was indicted for concealing $750,000 in income from the show and related businesses during a bankruptcy proceeding. That led to a year-long prison sentence. The message from the federal government is really clear. Once you are a public figure earning significant income, the scrutiny on your finances dramatically increases. And it's not always fraud, right? Sometimes it's just the sheer recklessness of trying to maintain the image. Heidi Montag and Spencer Pratt from The Hills. They famously blew through a $10 million fortune in just 2 years.
They admitted that they were spending money simply to keep up with the Joneses. They spent $40,000 on clothes in a single month, buying ridiculously high-priced items like $4,000 bottles of wine.
The need to maintain that visual of being a reality star, combined with a total lack of financial discipline, just eradicated a fortune almost instantly.
You have Todd Chrisley, of Chrisley Knows Best. Another example. Despite a successful long-running show, he filed for bankruptcy, allegedly having only $100 in his bank account at one point.
He had accumulated nearly $50 million in personal and corporate debt.
And eventually faced fraud and tax evasion charges that sent him to prison. The pressure to maintain the illusion is a highly destructive financial vortex that pulls in almost everyone who doesn't approach their new career with really sharp business sense.
So when we examine this exploitative nature of reality TV, we can't just focus on the talent fighting their tax bills. We have to look behind the camera at the production crews and the writers who make the unscripted magic happen.
Because the exploitation of them is arguably even more systemic. The findings published by the Writers Guild of America East, the WGAE, regarding nonfiction writer-producers, they're damning.
This workforce is crucial for shaping the narratives we see on screen.
But they're subjected to systemic underpayment, largely because they're often incorrectly classified as exempt employees, which allows companies to bypass labor laws.
So these are the people drafting scripts, character outlines, setting up situations, doing everything a writer does, but they don't get the union protection. What does that look like in terms of hours and pay?
The findings are stark. 84% of writer-producers surveyed worked more than 40 hours a week almost every week.
Okay.
Yet an astonishing 85% of them never received overtime pay.
Wow.
The WGAE estimated wage theft in the New York nonfiction industry alone at a minimum of $40 million annually. That wage theft directly contributes to those 60% profit margins we discussed earlier.
So the networks are saving money by simply refusing to pay time and a half when a writer-producer works a 60 or 80-hour week, which is pretty common in reality production.
Exactly. These individuals are integral to the creative process. They spend hours drafting detailed outlines, creating character descriptions to guide the editing process, writing interview questions, designing the so-called situations or challenges for the cast.
It's an insane amount of work.
Producers often pull 16-hour days straight during shoots and then immediately pivot to post-production, reviewing thousands of hours of footage and writing narrative scripts, often with absolutely no time off between phases.
And the lack of compensation for these long hours is a primary reason the networks can reap these enormous profits, because these writer-producers are paid so much less than their unionized scripted counterparts. And this widespread exploitation is what ultimately fueled the current high-profile push for change, the reality reckoning,
Right.
led by Bethenny Frankel, of all people.
Bethenny Frankel, having profited handsomely from her own savvy negotiation, is now leading this campaign, leveraging her platform to demand structural protections for reality performers who are currently excluded from standard union benefits enjoyed by actors.
Like minimum payments and, crucially, residuals.
Exactly.
So what are the core demands being put forth by the Reality Reckoning campaign? This is really a fight over how the network views its talent as disposable commodities or as actual creative workers.
The demands focus on addressing the long-term exploitation of their content and their likeness. First, mandatory residual payments. They are demanding 10% of the last negotiated fee whenever an episode is re-aired or streamed. Second, they are asking for base minimums, specifically demanding at least $5,000 per episode for all unscripted talent. That residual demand is particularly powerful because it hits the network right where those high profit margins exist. The continuous reuse of content. It does. Nene Leakes voiced this concern perfectly. She said her likeness can be used over and over and over again by networks without her seeing a dime beyond her initial salary. This aims to ensure reality performers are paid for their labor every single time the network profits from it.
And this is not just an independent celebrity pushing an agenda, right? This has real institutional support.
It does. SAG-AFTRA, the primary performers union in Hollywood, has publicly stated that they stand ready to assist Frankel and other reality performers in this fight to end exploitative practices. The union's involvement gives the movement significant weight.
It suggests that the era of treating reality performers as purely disposable talent might be coming to an end.
It could be. And the timing is also incredibly strategic. This push gained significant momentum during the recent Hollywood strikes, when networks leaned so heavily on unscripted content to fill the massive programming gaps.
Frankel argued that reality performers are the forgotten land of misfit toys in unscripted TV.
And that their moment to demand change is now, while the industry needs them most and public attention is focused on labor fairness.
The overall goal, as she's articulated, is to ensure that if exploitation is deemed unacceptable in one area of labor, like for Hollywood writers and actors, it should be equally unacceptable everywhere.
Including for the people creating the highly profitable reality TV content. It's a push for structural change across the board, fundamentally challenging the economic model that built this entire reality boom.
So what we've synthesized today, it paints a really detailed and, frankly, a rather sobering picture of a high-stakes ecosystem.
Mhm. The reality TV industry is fueled by two things: massive, low-cost production enabled by non-union labor and the aspirational desire for fame among the participants. And crucially, the networks hold all the contractual power. They relentlessly leverage that desire for notoriety against fair compensation and future entrepreneurial freedom.
The true success stories in this industry, the absolute outliers like Bethenny Frankel, they're the ones who prove that financial prosperity in unscripted television relies less on on-screen charisma or personality or even talent.
And more on ruthless business acumen and precise, often conceptual contract negotiation. Frankel's ability to walk away with $120 million was entirely dependent on valuing her intellectual property and just crossing out one small, easily overlooked line in her initial contract.
It's a powerful lesson in valuing your own IP and recognizing the worth of the platform you build and understanding that if you don't fight for that equity up front, the network will simply take it as part of their silent partnership clause.
Indeed. So here's a final provocative thought for you, the learner, to consider. Given the increasing regulatory scrutiny from the FTC regarding the use of non-competes in this industry and the fierce push for unionization led by major stars like Frankel, how will future reality TV contracts truly evolve? Will the modern Bethenny Clause, the one that grants the network a silent partnership in the star's business, will it survive these structural and legal challenges? Or is the era of the network taking a percentage of everything a star makes officially coming to an end?